If you want to take your Milky Way photography to the next level here in 2020, then I've got a couple different tips that are really going to help you out. First, let's talk about why you're not getting those amazing images that you might see online. And we're going to demo this with a couple images I took in the Utah desert. This photo here was taken with my new Nikon D780 camera and the Nikon 14 to 24mm lens. My camera settings were 15 seconds, f4, ISO 40,000. And even with those camera settings and that really high ISO, the image is still fairly dark. That's because when I'm shooting during the new moon, there's hardly any light coming down onto the desert floor, especially out here where there's no light pollution. So even with a very high ISO brightening up the image, it's a very dark photo. And I would have to come in here in Photoshop or Camera RAW and increase the exposure to see things a little bit better. And this leads us to the first problem, and the reason why you're not getting those amazing photos. It's because of your camera settings. Remember, mine was 15 seconds, f4, ISO 40,000. If you're still kind of a beginner, you might be thinking that it's the ISO causing my image not to look that great, because look how grainy this is if we zoom in. There's not only grain, there's color model, which is this weird green and purple and blue splotches all over the foreground. But it's actually not the ISO causing this, it's mainly the fact that my shutter speed was only 15 seconds. And that'll make more sense here in a minute. Another problem we have here is that even at 15 seconds and 14mm, my stars have some trailing if we zoom in. It's not that noticeable, but it's definitely there. And that leads us to the 500 rule, which is something that almost every one of you has heard about by now, which states that if you take 500 divided by the focal length of your lens, that's going to give you the shutter speed that you can have without star trails. So if we do the equation together with my 14mm lens, let's do 500 divided by 14mm, that's 35 seconds. According to that rule, I could shoot for almost 36 seconds and not have any star trails. And yet, as we saw in this photo, even at just 15 seconds, I'm already getting some noticeable star motion. And to make matters worse, for those of you using a crop sensor camera, you have to factor that into the equation as well. For those of you on Nikon, you need to multiply your focal length by 1.5, Canon by 1.6. So for those of you with, let's say, a Nikon D5600 and that 14mm lens that I'm using, we would do 14 times 1.5, and that gives us a focal length equivalent of 21mm. Then we can do 500 divided by 21. Now we're down to just about 24 seconds. That's a pretty big chunk of time that we just lost by using a crop sensor camera. And just to be clear here, I don't actually recommend using the 500 rule because you're going to get blurry stars. Personally, I'd recommend swapping out the number 500 with 200 or 300. That's going to give you a much shorter exposure, but your stars will actually be pretty sharp. And if you use the photo stacking method that I'm going to show you later on this video, that's going to give you the best of both worlds. You'll have sharp stars and a clean photo. And you're starting to see now why things just don't really work that well at night with a lot of camera systems out there, because the smaller your sensor, the faster your shutter speed has to be. Otherwise, you're going to get noticeable star trails in your image. And don't forget, your focal length ties in with this as well. That's why it's always recommended to have a very wide focal length for Milky Way photography, not only so you can capture a wider field of view, but you can shoot longer exposures without star trails. And the faster your shutter speed is, the more grain you're going to have in your photos. Because the way you have to understand this is the reason your photos are grainy at night is simply because you didn't capture enough light. And to prove that, let's take a look at another photo I took on this night right here. If we turn up the exposure and zoom in, look how clean and detailed this image is. There's hardly any grain visible. There's a few hot pixels, but you can even see the detail and the lines on the toadstool here, which, if you recall in this image, you can't even see them at all. It's just completely obscured by the grain. And my camera settings for this image were 240 seconds, ISO 1600. That's the secret to taking better Milky Way photos. That's all it is using a longer exposure. As you capture more light, you're going to essentially cover up that random noise and grain being generated by your camera sensor and have much more detail in your images. So let's over to Photoshop next and take an even closer look. Okay, so here we have, again, the 15-second long exposure. You'll notice that even up in the sky, it doesn't look very good at all. The stars are not that sharp. They have motion to them. The stars are the sky itself is very grainy. And the foreground too is completely obscured by this grain. But when I take a 4-minute long exposure, then if we look closer, it almost looks like a night and day difference, literally, because there's just so much more light in the scene. The colors are much more natural, and the only problem, of course, is the fact that the stars are blurring out. That's the big dilemma you have before you. And thankfully there's a simple fix, although you do have to spend some money on a star tracker. So the way a star tracker works is you're going to point it right up here at the North Star, if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. Once the star tracker is pointed up to the North Star, and you turn it on, your camera is now going to move very slowly with these stars, and it'll actually keep the stars sharp over the course of a 4-minute long exposure. Now I want to show you the difference between using a tracker and not using a tracker. Here is my final edit of the 15-second long exposure. It looks okay, but if we look at the foreground, you'll notice that that color model with all these random false blues and purples and greens and things like that, it looks absolutely terrible. Don't forget that you can't even hardly see the lines on the rocks, and overall, it just does not look that great because I only captured 15 seconds of light. And to be honest, if I was taking this 5 years ago, I'd have been really happy with this image because that's the best I could have done back then. But now that I have a simple star tracker, I can turn that on and take a 4-minute long exposure for my foreground, a 4-minute long exposure for my stars, blend the two together, and have an amazing, clean, detailed photo. I want you to pay attention too to the North American nebula up here. You can actually make it out very well, and the stars themselves are actually sharp even after 4 minutes, which is crazy. The fact that the stars are sharper here in a 4-minute long exposure than they were in a 15-second long exposure. That's the power of using a star tracker for your images. And if you're not quite ready to invest in a star tracker yet, there is one other technique you can try called photo stacking. The way this works is rather than taking a single exposure, we're going to take 5 to 20 exposures one after the other, and then bring them all into the computer and stack them together to reduce the grain. And that's what I did here. I was using my Nikon D780 again, the 14 to 24 millimeter lens, 20-second long exposure at ISO 6400. And then I just took actually 500 images one after the other, but I was creating a time lapse. So out of those 500 images, I just grabbed like 5 or 6 here. And we're going to test this out and see just how well the photo stacking method works. If you'd like to try this on your own, all you really have to do is go outside, set up your camera on a tripod, take a photo. As soon as it's done, take another photo, and repeat that, like I said, anywhere from 5 to 20 images. Then you can bring them all up in here in Lightroom or Camera RAW, apply some basic edits to get the photo looking good, and then once you think you have a pretty good exposure, you're ready to bring that into some stacking software. There's a lot of different choices that you can go with, but personally I'm going to be using Sequator today, which is a free download for Windows users. If you're on a Mac, you can get StarryLandscapeStacker, although that one does cost some money, but there is a free trial if you just want to give it a shot. Regardless what stacking software you're going to use, I always recommend you bring your photos into Lightroom or Camera RAW first, apply some basic edits, and then sync these settings with all your photos. Once every single photo has the same edits applied and the same white balance, we can save them as either TIFF or JPEG photos. In this case, it really doesn't matter, especially if you just want to test it out. Once you have all your photos saved as JPEGs or TIFF, you can click Done, and then you can head over to your stacking software. In this case, we'll use Sequator. Now that I've loaded up Sequator, the workflow is actually very simple, thankfully, and you want to make sure you follow along step by step, that way you don't get messed up. First, we're going to double click on Star Images, where there's the red light. Then we're going to scroll down and grab as many photos as you took. Surprisingly, I've been able to stack 40 images at 14 millimeters using a certain combination of settings here in the app. If you don't use this correct combinations of settings, you probably won't even be able to stack 3 photos before you get errors. So you really want to make sure you follow with me step by step. But it's really just up to you. Like I said, if you take anywhere from 5 to 20 images, that's going to work great. What I found is that if you take more than 20, the results are negligible and you're just kind of wasting time at that point. So I'm going to load up about 20 images here. Now that I've got my 20 photos at 14 millimeters, I can double click where it says output and there's a red light. This is where we're going to save our file. We're just naming it right now, so you can call it whatever you want. I'll do YouTube test 2 and then hit save. Now we need to come down to the lower menus over here, and first we're going to click where it says accumulation. Make sure you come down to the very bottom and choose freeze ground. This is kind of like the secret setting, and it seems like if I didn't have that clicked, the whole process would kind of fall apart. So make sure you click on freeze ground and the selective box is checked. Then we should see a red light that says sky region full area. Click on that, look down towards the bottom again, and you want to make sure you're choosing a regular mask with the auxiliary highlight box checked. Now you can move over to the image and you'll see a little paintbrush. If you scroll in or scroll out with your mouse, it'll make it bigger or smaller. What we want to do is paint the sky completely green, leaving the foreground completely red. And I have a very easy time here because I'm out in the desert. There's really no foreground obstructions at all. If you're back east though, or in an area with a lot of trees, this is going to be much more difficult. And that's really where you're going to run into your problems, because all those little branches are probably going to get in the way, and there's no real way to paint them out here in the application. But do the best you can. If you accidentally paint in green on your foreground like I did just there, you can use the right click on your mouse to erase it. So left click will paint in, right click will erase if you need to. But once you've specified your layer mask like you see here, the only thing left is to come down to your reduce distortion effects. There should be a blue light. Make sure it's either set to auto or complex because we're shooting with a wide angle lens. Now that we've done all that, we can click start, and it's going to go through, align all 20 photos in this case back to the same spot, then stack them together to reduce the random grain. And it should only take about a minute or two to complete. Once it's complete, it'll have a little pop-up window, and then you can go grab your TIFF file and open it up into Photoshop. And that's what we're going to look at next. First, let's do a quick refresher and look at our single 20-second long exposure. If I zoom in, there's a little bit of star trailing, which is to be expected, and there's a fair amount of grain, even in the bright portions of the sky. This was a 20-second exposure at ISO 6400. After we stack the 20 images in Sequator though, this is the result. Notice how much cleaner it is, and you can barely even see any grain at this point. There's our before and after. That really is an amazing difference. And to be honest, I'm just surprised that I was able to stack it all together, because normally when you're trying to stack images with a wide angle lens, it really has a tough time. But using those exact settings I showed you in Sequator tends to work really well, and you're going to be able to pull out much more detail and have it cleaner than you would with just a single exposure. And the same is true with our foreground. If we look down here, the foreground is noticeably cleaner than it was in the single exposure. So Sequator is a fantastic free application for all of us Windows users. If you're on a Mac, like I said, you can pay some money and get StarryLandscapeStacker instead. That'll do pretty much the same job. But let's take one last look at this image from afar. Here's the single 20-second long exposure, and here's the stack of 20 exposures all combined. To be honest, I really don't see much of a difference. If I spend some time really studying the image though, it looks like that color model has been reduced pretty significantly. I don't know how we're going to see this in the video, but see how it's kind of just splotchy, and there's like splotches of green and purple all throughout the photo in the 20-second long exposure? When we stack it together, it's evened out pretty well, and you'd be hard pressed to notice it anymore. So that's definitely improved there. And we have I think this is an H alpha portion of the night sky, but on my camera it shows up as a faint purple. That's a little bit more obvious too. So all things considered, Sequator and StarryLandscapeStacker do an awesome job just with your standard photos. It will increase your time out and location, obviously, because rather than taking a single exposure, you're taking multiple. But the fact of the matter is you don't need to go out and buy a star tracker if you don't want to, and you can still get better images by using this photo stacking method. Another benefit of the photo stacking method is that I didn't have to go through and spend all that time blending my exposures together between the foreground and the sky. Sequator did it all for me, and it automatically made the foreground nice and clean. So there are a lot of benefits to just using this simple stacking solution. However, even with these benefits, I still prefer using a star tracker just because I've gotten used to the process over the years, and for me, I really like the results that I get. And if we do one more comparison here, again, we have a beautiful, clean, detailed image where you can make out all this amazing detail in the Milky Way and even in the foreground, all the little tiny details that most people never would have even picked up with a standard camera and using their standard settings. But after 4 minutes, we have a radically different image. And the best part is, if you get a star tracker, you don't have to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a new camera or a new lens, because it's going to make whatever camera lens you have much more powerful and save you ultimately some money in the long run. And that really is the secret to taking better images in 2020. All you have to do is take a longer shutter speed. For your foreground, that's easy enough to do. Just put your camera on a tripod and shoot 4 minutes. But for the sky, that's where the star tracker comes in handy. And I've got tons and tons of videos here on YouTube. If you've been following my channel, then you already know all this, but for the newcomers, I'd highly recommend you go watch some of those. I've got buying guides so you can find the right one for your needs, how to set them up, how to do the polar alignment. And in the future, I'm going to do some challenges to show you just how easy it is to take better Milky Way photos at night. And those are going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to try and take my Milky Way photos in 10 minutes or less and also edit them in 10 minutes or less. So that's going to be an exciting series of videos. But that's all I've got for you today. I just wanted to share with you what I've learned over the past 5 years. That way you can invest your money properly in the best astrophotography gear. Because as you've seen today, you can go out and spend $10,000, or in my case, $2,000 or more on a new camera. But if you're only taking 15, 20-second long exposures, it's still not going to give you the results that you want. The only way to get these results is by taking a longer exposure, and usually with help of a star tracker. Alternatively, you could do the photo stacking method that we looked at today, and rather than taking a single exposure, you'll take maybe 20 exposures, one after the other, stack them together, and that's going to give you a noticeably cleaner photo, and you don't have to go out and spend any money on a star tracker. Finally, I do have some courses available on my website that's going to take you through this entire process from start to finish. You'll learn how I plan out my Milky Way photo shoots, what camera settings I use, how to actually set up your new star tracker in the field, and then most importantly, how to process your images to get these amazing results. Because as you saw at the start of the video, I mean, even with the 4-minute photo, the raw image doesn't look all that great by default. So you really have to know what you're doing when it comes to the post-processing. And that leads me to one last announcement. I did recently upgrade my astrophotography post-processing course to the 2020 edition, which features all new content. I pretty much went back and re-recorded every single video, and the audio is much clearer now. I'm also including all my latest techniques that I've learned over the past 2 years since I originally recorded it. And as always, this is a free update. So anybody who's already purchased the course, you should have received an email with the new download links. If not, be sure to check your spam folder, or you can send me an email and I'll make sure you get those. That's all I got for you today. And hopefully now that you understand how to take better Milky Way photos in 2020, you can really step things up with a relatively inexpensive piece of hardware and take your photography to the next level.